Order, the member for Mount Waverley.
And I am delighted to speak on the Owner Drivers and Forestry Contractors Amendment Bill 2019. And as some of you in this place may know, in my previous career I was a small business owner and also a member of the Labor Party, go figure, and also an IT consultant. And one of our clients, which I assisted in serving for well over a decade, was the Transport Workers Union. And I was fortunate enough to see how hard the leaders and organisers of the T-Dubs fight for their members and for the safety on our roads.
That's right.
And when I first started working for the TWU, the secretary was a man by the name of Bill Noonan. And I note that last August, the previous member for Williamstown, his son Wade Noonan, spoke passionately on this bill. And so I would have been assisting the T-Dubs in my previous capacity when the original legislation came in 2005 before the Parliament. And I'm proud to add my voice to their cause today on this much needed amendment. So the bill at its core seeks to ensure that our Victorian roads are safer by ensuring thousands of owner drivers, forestry contractors and on-demand workers are paid a living wage. And the bill will ensure these workers will no longer be vulnerable to exploitation or forced into unsafe practices by economic pressures down supply chains. The bill also expands the Act to cover third-party contracting platforms such as Uber Freight and Uber Eats, which are to be included in the definition of freight brokers. So whether you're driving a B-double hauling timber or riding a bike running dumplings with soy sauce, this bill provides comfort for small business owner drivers. And the big ticket items here are the prevention of undercutting joint agreements and penalties for non-compliance, payments being made to owner drivers within 30 days of invoice receipt, a new low-cost building dispute resolution process at the Small Business Commission, and providing information for small business owners, owner drivers and forestry contractors to understand the revenue and costs of the business they're starting, with a framework for the regulation of contracts between owner drivers, forestry contractors and their hirers. So the purpose of this bill, as I said, is to make miscellaneous amendments to the Owner Drivers and Forestry Contractors Act of 2005, which was introduced by the Bracks Labor government, another delivering Labor government. We had a few of those. And before this Act was introduced, workers were facing more and more increased demand on their work while simultaneously seeing less and less come home in their back pockets. And this provided basic protections for owner drivers by recognising the power imbalance between the owner drivers operating 1 to 3 vehicles versus big companies and big hirers, and aimed to improve the protections of small business drivers. The amendments to this bill seek to address changes that have occurred in this industry since 2005. So, if owner drivers and forestry contractors can cover their operational costs, maintain their vehicles, we'll have greater safety for drivers and for our road users. It sounds fairly simple, but for anyone who has run their own small business, day-to-day is rarely simple. We don't want drivers being forced into situations where they need to work additional hours or to cover operating costs. And this bill seeks to remedy this problem, which is occurring now. As the previous member for Williamstown mentioned 12 months ago, and is still relevant today, long-haul driving means an exposure to multiple risks. Long working hours, sedentary roles, poor access to nutritious food, social isolation, shift work, time pressures, low level of job control, and of course the biggest risk of all being fatigue. But if you're a small business owner driver, you can add running the books, negotiating contracts, chasing payments, managing cash flow, and the list goes on. Just because you get home doesn't mean you stop working. Now, being paid fairly can be the difference between being able to put food on the table for your kids that week or not. And if you're not being paid fairly, it may force some to push that maintenance for their truck 1 week further out. And this is obviously something that we can't advocate for as a society. So improving the protections available to small business, namely owner drivers, in the transport industry and haulage contractors in the forestry industry means a lot for our drivers. The drivers do a dangerous job when they keep Australia moving, and it's important that the right protections and workers' rights are in place for them. Especially important here is the amendment of contracting requirements in the Act to require the payment of invoices in 30 days. And I know that members from both sides have mentioned this being a very good thing. Now, having worked as a small business owner, I understand that what you really want to do is actually do the work. When starting a small business, you're most likely living month to month, and that gets even harder when you don't know if the money is coming in 60 days or 90 days or even longer. Our owner-drivers want to drive and earn a living. Chasing a hirer for a payment 120 days overdue means you aren't earning. Like, arguing over a contract means you aren't driving and you aren't earning. These are the problems that this bill seeks to remedy. Starting up business is hard, and this amendment bill will ensure that new drivers and forestry contractors have a better understanding of the costs of the new job that they'll be undertaking. Our owner-drivers need this bill and their families need this bill. This bill is not only about establishing a framework for compliance and enforcement, but also ensuring this framework is used by introducing penalties for non-compliance with the mandatory requirements of the Act. These amendments ensure owner-drivers and forestry contractors better understand cost structures, the importance of negotiating fair contracts and running successful small businesses. And this amendment will clarify the definition of freight broker, ensuring contractors employed through third-party contracting platforms like Uber Freight are covered. The Act will now require a hirer or a freight broker to provide the rates and cost schedule annually rather than each time the contractor is engaged. And it also amends the Act to clarify that contractors have the option of being covered by the same terms and conditions of an existing contract that has been jointly negotiated, while at the same time remaining the ability to negotiate their own contractual arrangements. And this is important to ensure consistency and for start-up drivers to be able to forecast their finances. So this bill will also amend the functions of the Transport Industry Council and Forestry Industry Councils to specify that they can provide advice and make recommendations to the Minister on promoting industry best practice, education and training. And these councils are made up of members from industry and employee associations and government, and they're responsible for making recommendations to that minister for industrial relations on commercial practices affecting owner-drivers and forestry contractors. So, as a previous small business owner, I understand the trials and tribulations of trying to settle a dispute over accounts. And the last thing you need to do is end up in court or VCAT. It's costly, it's stressful, you don't want to be there. The process is not just costly, but it takes so much time you're not earning. For owner-drivers who have disputes with hirers, this new amendment creates a dispute resolution procedure which specifies that the Small Business Commission can arrange arbitration where the parties to the dispute agree. This means drivers can have a faster, low-cost and confidential binding dispute resolution process for parties in dispute. So this bill strengthens the initial Act from 2005 to ensure that issues with inevitability affect the well-being of drivers are considered and addressed. It understands the owner-driver's role as essentially a small business owner and seeks to implement basic rights to even out the playing field between owner-driver and hirers. I don't know if there's one person in this room who'd be impressed to have to wait a random 30, 60 or 90 days to see their payroll in. Enshrining basic protections around pay due dates is incredibly important. And the owner-drivers and contract drivers industry needs education, enforcement and compliance, and this bill will deliver it. The people making recommendations to the Minister need to be people who speak on behalf of these workers and who understand their roles. Amending the bill so that the Transport Industry Council and Forestry Industry Council to specify they can provide advice and make recommendations to the Minister on promoting industry best practice, education and training is also incredibly important, as I said. So these reforms will hopefully see improvements for over-drivers, and I think they will. Drivers should be getting paid on time, and drivers should be safe at work, and drivers should be getting paid fairly. The Transport Workers Union have worked hard to advocate at every opportunity to drive safer outcomes for their members and the industry. And I'd like to congratulate John Berger, his staff, organisers, delegates and members at the Victorian Tas branch for their tireless efforts in making their members safer. But let's also note that every one of us that share the roads with our owner-driver mates are also safer because of this bill. Ensuring that contractors can cover their business costs and maintain vehicles will result in greater safety for all our road users, as drivers will not need to work additional hours, potentially breaching fatigue laws or road rules to cover the cost of running their business. I commend this bill to the House.